He was not supposed to be here. Kang Seojun sat in the back corner of a bar that had no sign, no menu, and no record of existing, a glass of scotch in front of him that he had not touched in 40 minutes. The leather of the booth was dark. The light was low. Both suited him fine. He needed a place where no one would look at him, and this was it. He was crying. Not quietly. Not with the restrained dignity of a man who had spent 26 years learning to feel nothing in front of other people. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere underneath all of that, from a place that does not care about composure, does not care who is watching, because the thing that broke was too big to hold with good posture. His father's voice was still in his ears. Flat. Delivered the way Kang Do-hyun delivered everything, without cruelty, without hesitation, without the decency of looking away. You were never supposed to exist. 7 words. Said the way a man might read a line from a contract he had reviewed before. Seojun had walked out. Down the corridor of the family estate, past the 2 men posted at the door who lowered their eyes the way everyone always did, into the waiting car, and then here. He had not planned the bar. His hands had simply stopped giving directions. He did not notice the figure who sat down across from him until the bench shifted under a new weight. The young man who settled into the opposite seat was not loud about it. He moved the way careful people move in dim rooms, with a slight tilt of the head, a hand that grazed the table edge before committing to a direction. His eyes were warm and dark and aimed at a point near Seojun's face with the focused attention of someone who had long ago learned to read a room without needing every detail to be sharp. He was still in work clothes. Gray sweater. No tie. He looked like someone who had stopped here on his way home from somewhere ordinary, which made no sense, because this bar was not the kind of place ordinary people found. He slid a glass of water across the table. "Start with this," he said. Seojun stared at him. His voice, when it came, was completely wrecked. "I don't know you." "No," the young man agreed. He did not move to leave. "But I know what it looks like when someone is crying about something they were never allowed to say out loud." Seojun's hand closed around the glass. He did not drink it. He did not tell him to leave. If you felt that, if this story already has you, drop a comment right now. Tell me what you're feeling. And stay with me, because this is only the beginning. Chan-woo noticed before Yunho said a word. That was the thing about Chan-woo. He had known Park Yunho for 6 years, through 3 apartments, 2 job changes, and 1 particularly bad winter in Incheon, and he had learned to read the particular quality of silence that meant something was happening that Yunho had not yet decided to share. He waited until their lunch break, until they were sitting in the narrow break room of the logistics firm in Mapogu with their takeout containers open between them, before he said, "Who was he?" Not a question. A statement of arrival. Yunho picked up his chopsticks. "A man at the bar last night. He was having a difficult time. I sat with him for a while." "Difficult time?" Chan-woo repeated. "He was crying." Chan-woo set down his food. "Yunho, yeah. You sat down next to a crying stranger in Itaewon at night. He was going to make himself sick. Most people let strangers make themselves sick. That is considered normal behavior." Yunho did not answer that. He had caught a name, not asked for it, just heard it when the bartender had quietly confirmed a card charge near the end of the night. Kang Seojun. He had held the name the way he held most things, carefully, without pressure, waiting to understand what weight it carried. He said it to Chan-woo now. Chan-woo picked up his phone. He typed. The room was quiet for 6 seconds. Then Chan-woo's expression changed in the specific way it changed when something was worse than expected. "Yunho, yeah. That's Kang Do-hyun's son." The Kang name did not need explanation. It was the kind of name that showed up in financial news with careful wording. The kind that made mid-level managers speak more quietly when a black SUV appeared in the parking structure. The Kang family owned things, buildings, companies, politicians, and certain categories of silence, and everyone in the city knew it, even the people who claimed they didn't. Chan-woo listed his reasons with the calm efficiency of a man who had prepared them the moment the search results loaded. 1. Kang Seojun had personally ended 3 business partnerships that quarter, and all 3 of those companies no longer existed. 2. The bar where Yunho had sat down was not a public establishment, which meant Yunho should not have been able to walk into it at all, and the fact that he had was something worth thinking about. 3. Men like this did not need strangers to hand them water. Men like this had entire rooms of people whose job was to hand them things. Yunho listened to all 3. He nodded. Then the company-wide memo arrived on his screen. An internal audit of the archive and records department. Effective immediately. To be conducted personally by a senior Kang executive. Yunho read the name at the bottom of the memo. He told himself it was coincidence. He almost believed it. Seojun did not come for the audit. The audit was real. The paperwork was filed, the schedule was sent. 2 members of his compliance team arrived at the logistics firm at 9 in the morning and began their review with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before. But Seojun was not with them. He arrived 40 minutes later, alone, and he did not go to the conference room where the audit was being conducted. He went to the archive. He had the lawyer's folder under his arm. He had the birth certificate. He had the name he had found in the sealed documents 3 days ago, cross-referenced with the employee records of every company the Kang family held a controlling stake in, which was how a search that should have taken a week had taken 11 hours. He had Yunho's face from the bar, and he had the particular sick geometry of what his father had constructed, and he had spent 3 days deciding whether to do this or disappear the information entirely. He opened the archive room door. Yunho was at the far end of the row, reshelving a stack of folders with his back to the entrance, head tilted at that slight angle Seojun had catalogued without meaning to. He turned at the sound of the door the way a person turns when they already knew someone was coming. Seojun placed the document folder on the table between them. "You need to read this," he said. "Or I can tell you. Either way, your life changes today." Yunho looked at the folder. His hands did not reach for it immediately. He was quiet the way only people who have survived difficult things are quiet, not frozen, just measuring. Seojun told him. The full structure of it. Coer clause. Cardiac episode. Do-hyun's calculation that naming his hidden son publicly was cheaper than letting Chairman Oh Byung-si use that son as a weapon. The rival faction that had already located Yunho's address in Maple-gu. The reality that as of 72 hours ago, Park Yunho had become a variable in a war he had never agreed to enter. He did not soften it. He did not construct a gentler version. When he finished, Yunho was still looking at the folder. The silence between them had weight. "The offer," Seojun said, "is this. You come to the estate. Voluntarily. Under my protection. We navigate what my father started, together. Or you stay here, unprotected, and Oh Byung-si's people reach you before the week is out. Those are the choices. I am not manufacturing the urgency." Yunho was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the fluorescent light above them buzzed once, faintly, and went steady again. "How do I know," he said finally, "that you're not the more dangerous option?" Seojun looked at him. "You don't." The Kang estate did not announce itself. There was no gate with a crest, no dramatic entrance lined with stone. There was a wall, long, pale, set back from a private road in the hills north of Gangnam, and then a door in that wall, and then the world changed. The gravel underfoot was fine and even. The air was cooler, which made no architectural sense, but Yunho noticed it the way he noticed most things, through his skin before his eyes confirmed it. Jin Hyuk met him at the entrance. He was a lean man in his early 30s with a face that gave away nothing and a quality of stillness that Yunho recognized, the stillness of someone who was always watching, always counting. He introduced himself once, did not repeat his name, and then said, "I'll show you to the guest wing." What he did instead was take a route through the estate that included 3 unnecessary turns, a corridor junction that branched 4 ways without signage, and a staircase landing with 2 doors that looked identical. Yunho said nothing. He kept his hand from trailing along the wall, which was what he wanted to do. Instead he counted steps, noted the change in floor surface from stone to wood and back to stone, tracked the air current from the east-facing windows. At the end of the route, Jin-hyuk stopped. Yunho stopped beside him, having arrived correctly, having said nothing about the test. Jin-hyuk looked at him for a moment. Then he opened the correct door and said, "The archive room is on the lower level, second left from the east stairs. It needs attention." Nothing more. He left. Seojun was on the upper landing. He did not come down. He watched Yunho cross the main hall below with the quiet, contained attention of a man trying to understand something he had not yet named. The estate's silence settled around both of them without touching either. Yunho found the archive room on his own. It was large, dense with shelving, and recently disrupted, files pulled and replaced without system during a security sweep. The order collapsed entirely. He stood in the entrance for a moment. Then he began. His hands moved the way they always moved when he worked, without hurry, without performance, reading the labels through touch and peripheral confirmation, building a sequence from the logic of what was already there. He did not need the room to be organized the way someone else had organized it. He needed it to make sense. Those were different things, and he had always known the difference. He did not hear Seojun come downstairs. "You didn't have to do that," Seojun said from the doorway. Yunho did not turn around. "I know. I do things because they need doing. Not because someone told me to." Seojun stayed in the doorway. He had meant to say something else, something functional, about the schedule, about the meeting tomorrow with the legal team. He did not say any of it. Jin-hyuk passed behind him in the corridor a few minutes later, moving toward the kitchen without comment. But later that evening, Seojun passed the archive room again and caught Jin-hyuk standing in the doorway looking in at Yunho, still working, still unhurried. The expression on Jin-hyuk's face was not the one he had worn that morning. It was something else entirely. Something that looked, if Seojun was reading it correctly, almost like respect. That was something. Because Jin-hyuk did not give that easily. What is Yunho doing to this household, and to Seojun, without even trying? Tell me in the comments. I need to know you're feeling this. And subscribe. It was past 11 when Seojun came back downstairs. He had told himself he was going to the kitchen. The kitchen was on the opposite side of the estate from the archive room, a fact he did not examine closely. The archive room had one lamp on. The rest of the floor was dark. Yunho was still at the long central table, working through a stack of folders that had been in the wrong decade entirely, and he had built a system along the table's edge, small paper clips bent at different angles, a folded corner here, a rubber band there, a tactile map of a filing logic that Seojun had not seen before and immediately understood was more efficient than the one his own staff used. He stood in the entrance without announcing himself. Yunho's head tilted slightly. He had heard the footstep. "You're still here," Yunho said, not looking up. "I live here. That's a reason to be anywhere in this building. It's not a reason to be in this room at this hour." Seojun crossed to the table. He looked at the paper clip system. "You built this tonight. It needed building. You built an entirely new system rather than asking for accommodation." Yunho's hands paused on a folder. "Asking makes people uncomfortable. Building makes them irrelevant." Seojun was quiet. The lamp put a warm circle of light on the table between them and left everything else in dark. He pulled out the chair across from Yunho and sat down, which surprised him. He had not decided to do that. "I've been doing the same thing for 26 years, he said. "Building systems so no one sees what I can't do." Yunho looked up at that. Not all the way. His gaze arrived at a point near Seojun's face with its characteristic, careful precision. He did not say anything immediately, which was its own kind of response. They talked. Not about the documents. About the Joseon-era archive systems that the early bureaucratic class had developed before paper was cheap. Oral record chains, object-based indexes, the way the annals of the Joseon dynasty had survived 500 years not because of one central authority but because of redundant, distributed copies held by people who were never supposed to trust each other. About how every power structure in Korean history had eventually collapsed the moment it stopped being accountable to its own records. About how paper trails were the only honest thing that men in power left behind, whether they meant to or not. Yunho knew more than Seojun expected. He matched every reference and went further, the quiet confidence of a man who had educated himself without the benefit of private tutors or a university library card, which made the knowledge sit differently, earned in a way that showed. Seojun found himself leaning forward without noticing. At some point he reached past Yunho to retrieve a document from the upper shelf, a folder that had been misshelved above Yunho's reach. His arm came close. The proximity was unplanned, and neither of them moved to correct it. "You smell like the cold," Yunho said quietly. Not to the room. To him. "I don't mean that as an insult." Seojun did not move. The lamp hummed. The estate was completely silent around them. 3 full seconds passed in which either of them breathed correctly. Then his phone rang. Jin-hyuk. One word. Byung-si. The moment broke the way a glass breaks, completely, all at once, nothing left to repair. Oh no. Oh no. If you felt that moment shatter, if you wanted those 3 seconds to last forever, that means this story has you exactly where it's supposed to. The Byung-si alert had turned the strategy room cold. 3 hours of controlled voices and hard numbers and the kind of quiet that sits over a table when every person in the room understands the real weight of what is being discussed. Jin-hyuk had pulled satellite maps. Seojun had made 2 calls that he did not put on speaker. By the time the room emptied it was past 9, and the danger that had been a distant shape was now something with edges and a schedule. Seojun found Yunho on the rear terrace. He was standing at the stone railing with the city spread out below him, Seoul at night, all that light reaching up into a sky that never quite went dark. His hands were on the railing. His face was turned toward the view with the particular quality of attention he brought to everything, not passive, not decorative, genuinely reading what was there. Seojun stood beside him without preamble. For a while either of them spoke. The city moved far below. The air was sharp and cool, carrying the distant sound of traffic the way water carries sound, changed, softened, made into something almost musical by the distance. Then Seojun said something he had not planned to say. He said that he had gone to the logistics firm that first morning before the lawyer's documents arrived. Before he knew. He told Yunho he had stood in that corridor for 43 seconds watching through the glass of the archive room and had told himself it was due diligence on the audit. That he had filed the lie neatly and gone back to his office and spent the next 6 hours being unable to think about anything else. That he had known, even then, exactly what he was doing and exactly why he was lying about it. Yunho listened without moving. Without filling the silence with anything. "So you found me twice," he said. "Once by accident. Once on purpose." "Yes." "And now you know we share blood?" "Yes." "Does that change what you just told me?" The city lights held steady below them. Seojun's jaw was tight. The answer was already there. Had been there since the moment the lawyer opened that folder, and the first thing Seojun felt, underneath the vertigo and the grief, was something that had nothing to do with documents. Something that only sharpened when he understood what they were to each other, and refused to go quiet. "It should," he said. "It doesn't." Yunho was still for one breath. Then his hand moved, not toward Seojun's face, not reaching dramatically across the space between them, just finding his hand where it rested on the railing and covering it. Steady. Certain. The way Yunho did everything. Either of them spoke. Either of them pulled away. Below, the city kept moving, indifferent and enormous. And somewhere at the estate's front gate, a black SUV with no Kang markings had been parked in the same position for 40 minutes. The warmth of that terrace was real. The danger waiting at the gate was also real. And the cruelest thing about that night was that both of those things were true at exactly the same time. Tell me in the comments, did you feel that? That moment on the railing? Stay close, because Chapter 7 is where everything Seojun has been protecting Yunho from walks through the door. Chapter 7. The photograph was the size of a standard print. Jin-hyuk set it on the table between them without theater, face up, no commentary beyond what he had already said in the doorway. The image was taken through the window of the room they were standing in now. Recent, as he had noted. Shot from outside the estate wall with a lens that had no business existing at a civilian price point. Yunho's profile. The lamp. His hands on the documents. Someone had been outside that wall with equipment, patience, and a specific target in mind. Seojun looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking. Then he turned to Yunho. He told him everything. Not the version constructed to minimize alarm. The full architecture, Do-hyun's original erasure of Yunho's mother, the financial restructuring designed to ensure she could never establish paternity through legal channels, the years of calculated distance while Yunho grew up in Incheon in a one-bedroom apartment with a woman who worked 2 jobs and never once told her son why their life felt like an apology for existing. The way Oh Byung-se's faction had found the birth record that Do-hyun's lawyers had buried in a subsidiary's legacy files. The way Yunho had been located, catalogued, and assessed as a pressure point before Seojun had ever walked past that archive room glass. Yunho sat across from him and asked questions. Not loud ones. Precise, sequential questions delivered in the same voice he used when he was working through a disorganized filing system, reading what was actually there rather than what he had hoped to find. When the questions were done, he was quiet for a long time. He didn't hide me because he was ashamed of me, Yunho said finally. He hid me because I was useful later. I was always an asset. Just deferred. Yes. And you? What are you to him? Seojun said nothing. The same thing, Yunho said. Just deployed sooner. The weight of that sat between them without decoration. 2 men. Same father. Same function. One given everything and shaped into a weapon. One given nothing and left to become something real. The same wound at different depths. Yunho looked at him with that careful, near-precise gaze, the one that arrived just left of center and read more than most people caught looking straight on. I'm not leaving because of him, he said. I decided that the moment you told me the truth instead of constructing a version of it. Seojun opened his mouth. Jin-hyuk stepped into the doorway. His face was the controlled, even expression he wore when the information was bad enough that showing it would cost something. The SUV from last night, he said. Registered to Oh Byung-se's youngest son. He paused one beat. He had a photograph of Yunho SSI. Recent. Through this window. The room went very still. Yunho did not reach for the photograph. He did not need to see it. He had already read the silence around it clearly enough. The message arrived wrapped in the language of a business inquiry. A third party, a mid-tier legal firm with a Yeouido address and no obvious connection to Oh Byung-se until the third layer of the corporate structure, sent a single document to the Kang Estate's official legal inbox at 7 in the morning. Jin-hyuk brought it to Seojun already flagged. The document was 4 paragraphs. Professionally written. The last paragraph was the one that mattered. It named Yunho's partial vision condition. His home address in Maple-gu, which he had not yet vacated. The name of Im Chan-woo, identified as his primary personal contact. The logistics firm. The fact that no security personnel were currently assigned to Park Yunho despite his coer status. A lever. Clearly identified. Presented without threat language because the absence of threat language was itself the threat. Seojun read the document twice. His jaw set. His hands went completely still on the desk, which was the thing Yunho had come to understand was not composure. It was the moment before composure broke. You're frightened, Yunho said from the chair across the room. I don't get frightened. You do. You just call it something else. Seojun looked at him. Something moved through his expression that did not have a name in any language of control. Then he stood, crossed to the door, said 2 words to Jin-hyuk in the corridor, and came back. Interior room, he said to Yunho. No windows. Now. The room was small, a document review room off the lower corridor, built for function with a narrow table, 2 chairs, and walls on all four sides. Jin-hyuk stationed himself outside the closed door without being asked. Inside, Seojun set the document on the table and they worked through the legal response line by line, their voices low, the overhead lights steady and indifferent above them. The work was real. It also required them to sit close enough that their shoulders occasionally made contact when they both reached for the same page. Neither acknowledged it. Neither moved away. Somewhere around midnight the words stopped making sense for Yunho. His hands slowed. His head dropped forward slightly over the papers and he was asleep before the decision fully formed, the way exhausted people sleep, completely and without warning, one moment present and the next entirely gone. Seojun looked at him across the table. He did not wake him. He turned off the overhead light, leaving the desk lamp on its lowest setting, and sat back in his chair in the near dark and watched the door and did not sleep at all. Yunho's breathing was even and quiet. The estate was completely still around them. At 3 a.m, Jin-hyuk knocked twice. The signal they had agreed on for immediate threat. Seojun was already standing before the second knock landed. The lower corridor was quiet in the way that corridors go quiet after something has already happened in them. Yunho sat in the interior room with the door closed and Jin-hyuk's voice coming through it at controlled intervals, short, even sentences that told him the situation was being managed without telling him what managed meant in this context, in this house, with these particular men. He heard sounds that he catalogued without allowing himself to fully translate. A door. Footsteps that were not Jin-hyuk's. A silence that lasted longer than silence should. Then nothing for 11 minutes. Then the door opened and Seojun walked in. The cut along his jaw was still bleeding lightly, a clean line, already beginning to close, but not finished. His right hand's knuckles were split at 2 points. His coat was torn at the left shoulder seam. He was entirely upright, entirely present, and his eyes when they found Yunho across the room were clear and direct and carried nothing that needed to be hidden. Yunho did not ask what happened. He crossed the room, found the first aid kit Jin-hyuk had left on the side table, and brought it to where Seojun had sat down in the chair nearest the lamp. He opened it by touch, located the antiseptic and the gauze with the efficiency of someone who did not need perfect light to do careful work, and began to clean the cut along Seojun's jaw. Seojun sat completely still. "You're not horrified," he said. "I'm not naive," Yunho replied. His hands did not shake. "I knew what world I walked into. Most people, when they see this side of me. I'm not most people." His voice was quiet and certain, the way everything about him was quiet and certain, not small, just settled. "And you are not most men." He pressed the gauze into place. Held it there a moment past the point of medical necessity, his fingers against Seojun's jaw, the lamp between them throwing everything into warm gold and close shadow. His forehead dropped forward, just slightly, just enough, and came to rest against Seojun's temple. Either of them moved. "Don't do that again," Yunho said. Not loudly. Not as a command. As something much more vulnerable than either of those things. "Get hurt. I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to come back." Seojun's hand came up from his knee slowly and covered Yunho's where it rested against his face. "I can't promise I'll always be clean," he said. His voice was low and entirely stripped of everything he usually kept in front of it. "But I can promise I'll always come back to you." A beat passed. "Always." Neither of them moved for a very long time. The lamp held steady. The estate was quiet. Outside the window, the Seoul sky was beginning its first pale shift toward morning, the darkness thinning at the edges the way it does when the night has finally run out of reasons to stay. If you felt that, if you are sitting with that moment right now, that is what this story was always building toward. Oh Byung-su's reach into the Kang estate ended the way all overextended things end, not with a dramatic collapse but with a series of quiet, irreversible removals. Seojun handled the structure of it with the same precision he brought to everything, methodically, without excess, closing each point of exposure until there was nothing left to leverage. The legal document from the Yodo firm was answered in kind. The corporate layers were unraveled and made public to the right people, which cost Byung-soo 3 board positions and a kind of credibility that does not rebuild. The youngest son with the photograph was dealt with in a conversation that Jin Hyuk attended and that no one discussed afterward. By the end of the second week, the threat had no more architecture to stand on. It simply stopped. 3 days after the last communication went unanswered, Seojun arranged a meeting at the family estate. A single meeting. He and Yunho arrived at the same time, from the same car, and walked into Kang Do-hyun's study side by side. Do-hyun was seated behind his desk. He looked at both of them. He looked for a long time at Yunho, at the careful way Yunho held himself, the slight tilt of the head, the absolute absence of anger or performance in his expression. A man who had come not to collect a debt but simply to be seen. Seojun did not rage. Yunho did not plead. They stood there together in the silence of that room and let Do-hyun see clearly what 26 years of architecture had actually produced. 2 men who should never have found each other, standing close enough that their arms touched, looking at the man who had designed both of their lives as instruments, and discovering that they had become something he had not planned for. Something real. Do-hyun said several things. None of them were worth the air they displaced. The meeting lasted 14 minutes. 6 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, Seojun walked into a building in Yongsan-gu that had not existed 6 months ago. The sign by the entrance read Kang Records and Archives Services, a legitimate subsidiary, carved out of the restructured Kang Holdings and incorporated cleanly, with a board of 3 and a managing director whose name was on the license. The office smelled like fresh paper and the particular clean neutrality of a room that had been organized with real intention. There were 4 junior coordinators at their stations, young, focused, working through a document intake process with a system that used tactile markers along the folder edges and a color-coded corner notation that functioned equally well at full sight or near blindness. Yunho had trained all 4 of them himself. He was at the far desk when Seojun came through the door, head tilted at its familiar angle toward the document in his hands. "You're early," he said, not looking up. "I know." Seojun crossed the room and stopped in front of the desk, his hands in his coat pockets, his face carrying the expression it only ever carried in this room, in this man's presence, open in a way that no one else in Seoul had ever seen and no one else in Seoul was going to. "I wanted to see you before you were ready." Yunho set the document down. He looked up, that careful, precise, unhurried gaze arriving at the place where Seojun's face was, reading everything that was there. Then the corner of his mouth moved. "Well," he said. "Sit down." He slid a glass of water across the desk. Seojun sat down. He picked up the glass. And in the particular quality of that Tuesday afternoon light, pale spring sun coming through the east-facing window, the quiet industry of 4 people working in a system built from nothing by a man who had been told all his life that nothing was what he deserved, something in his chest that had been locked for 26 years stayed open. The crying, it turned out, had been the beginning of everything. If this story moved you, if Seojun and Yunho found their way into the part of you that needed to believe that broken things can become the most unbreakable ones, then this ending was made for you. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Every episode on this channel is built for the people who feel deeply, who love hard, and who know that the best stories are the ones that stay with you long after they end. Drop a comment and tell me what this story meant to you. Tell me which moment hit hardest. Tell me what you felt when Yunho slid that glass of water across the desk the first time, and what you felt the second time, and whether those 2 feelings were the same. And if someone in your life needs this story, someone who is carrying something heavy, someone who needs to be reminded that breaking open is not the end of strength but the beginning of it, share this with them. These stories travel because you carry them. Thank you for staying until the end.